Hi everybody, welcome to week 2 of the Pepin Tote Sew Along. Okay, so here's my front pocket and we're going to flip it over so the wrong side is facing up. And I like to have a little seam gauge handy for this part, as well as some spray starch. So we're just going to press it down by 1/4 inch. This one I usually eyeball. And then you'll flip it back right side facing up, and then place it right sides together, and that fold is 1.5 inches. Okay, so then we're going to take it over to the machine and we're going to sew along this edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side of the pocket. Okay, so I've sewn along each edge there. You can stop along this inner fold and back stitch, and then I'm going to clip the corners. Get rid of those guys. And then we're going to turn this top edge right side out. So I like to grab those little edges there, kind of use my finger to get in to flip it right side out. And then I have this gigantic, awesome point turner. The Duluth, Minnesota Quilt Guild, one of their members made this and I love using it. So I use that to push out the corners. And then we're going to go ahead and take each edge, press it wrong sides together. It's going to naturally want to curve in like that by 1/2 inch. And then I go ahead and I give this top edge another spray before I press it. And that's your pocket. And then we're going to go ahead and top stitch right along this folded edge all the way across. Since this is a busy print, I'm going to stitch on this side. Sometimes if it's a solid and I really want that line to be really crisp and straight, I'll sew with the right side facing up, but then you have to be really careful about following that edge. You could pre-mark it with a ruler, but that's kind of a couple ideas for you. If you've ever sewn a dress shirt, this is kind of a similar construction of a dress shirt pocket. If you wanted to be extra cautious, you could serge or zigzag these 3 edges before pressing. I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine. I've got the pocket here. You can see the top stitching that I did. You can see it from this side. All right, so next we're going to place the front pocket wrong side down, centered on this main exterior piece. And this is that short edge of the main exterior right here. What I like to do to make sure that it's centered is I finger press the pocket in half, just align those short edges and then give it a little finger press. And same for the main exterior. You can just fold it in half and press the center, or you can measure and just take the half measurement. And I like to use my gridded ruler to get a really straight line, so I'm going to use the measurement in the pattern and mark that down this way, and then make note of the center mark. I'm going to align the finger press marking right to that center line, and then push it right up next to that ruler and just double check that everything is nice and square looking, and then I'm going to go ahead and pin it in place just along the edges. So then I like to go ahead and just double check that everything stayed in place while I pin. So I just double check it with the ruler and everything is set to go. And then we'll take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch along the edges of the pocket, the 2 edges in the bottom. Okay, so we're going to be top stitching along these 3 edges of your front pocket, and I am going to start in my upper left corner, what will be the upper left corner of the pocket. And we're going to start and end with a small triangle, and it's fairly narrow and tall, and my goal at the top edge here is to get 2 to 3 stitches max along this top edge where I pivot and sew. I'm going to be using just under a 3mm, and I'm going to be back stitching and then traveling up the side here. And if you'll notice, I am using the needle down function on my machine, so every time I stop, the needle is going to go down into my fabric. I find that really helpful for any kind of top stitching, really, but especially on pocket. Two stitches over, since that's what I got the first time. And then I'm going to travel back down to meet that top stitching. Okay, so that's what the triangle looks like. And your front pocket is all set. Okay, so I have the main exterior piece all done with the pocket attached, and we're going to complete the exterior. You're going to want to fold the main exterior right sides together in half. So you're going to line up those two edges here, and then we're going to mark the bottom corners. That'll be the cutout for boxing the corners in the next step. So I like to use a pencil and just a small ruler here. And these dimensions are in the pattern. Just make sure your top edges are aligned when you go to mark that bottom fold. And you could cut with a rotary cutter, but I always like to use extra caution and just use a really nice sharp scissors. Just cutting along those marked lines. Okay, so we're going to take it over to the machine. We're going to sew each of the side seams, and then we're going to box the corners. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sew each side seam using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. The other thing I forgot to mention is that we're going to have a marking right here at this bottom fold on each side of that cutout corner. You're going to have a marking right here at that bottom fold, and I'll show you why we need that in just a second. Now on to the other side seam. Okay, so here's that marking on the bottom fold there, and to box the corner, you're going to reach inside in between the layers. And I just like to finger press this seam open for now. That way I can kind of save a step to the ironing board. But I'll just finger press that open, and I'm going to be aligning that seam to that marking. The fabrics are right sides together. And then to box the corner, we're going to sew 1/2 inch seam allowance straight across. And then we're going to repeat that same step for the other corner. Finger press that open. And align that marking. Okay, so there's your second bottom corner. And then we can go ahead and we'll turn the bag right side out. So here is a little rundown of how to install a spring snap. These are the kind that I carry in my shop, but you can probably get some at places like Joann's. I know the Dritz brand is I like also. It's I think it's just as good. It's almost the same for installation, but you would have to have this setting tool that's specific to that brand. So the snap is made up of 4 parts: the cap, the socket, the post, okay, and the stud. So these two, the cap and the socket, they go on the pocket, the front side. They're going to sandwich that one side of the pocket. And then post and the stud, they go on to the main exterior. So the other things you are going to need for installation is a pencil. I just use a regular pencil, a little seam gauge for measuring. You'll need the setting tools, and I just have a little hammer. You'll also need a hole punch, and I have this rotary hole punch. This is from Tandy Leather, and I just use the smallest size to punch the hole for that. So I've gone ahead and I'm going to mark the center of this pocket, and then I'm going to measure the 3/4 of an inch down from the edge. I can kind of see the little center marking from when I installed the pocket, but I'll make a little dot there. And then I'm going to go ahead and punch the hole here, the rotary tool. So there's the hole. So once I've punched that hole, I'm just going to make a marking in that hole that's going to go to the back side on the main exterior. So that's where I'm going to know where to place the other half of the snap. And I'm going to go ahead and push the cap half through the front of the pocket, and then the stud sits over that. I'm going to grab my anvil. And I forgot to mention that I have a little board that I use. You could use like a kitchen cutting board. This one's special for leather cutting tools, but anything that's going to protect the surface that you're working on if you're worried about that at all. So then I'm going to set the cap on that anvil, and then the side of the tool is what we're going to set that with. And I'm going to give it a few hard taps with the hammer. So that front half of the cap is set, and if it's loose at all, you should just give it another few taps and that should do it for you. So now we're ready for the other half of the snap, and I've gone ahead and added a few extra layers of just the SF101 interfacing. This canvas is pretty lightweight as far as canvas goes, so it kind of depends. You'll have to get a feel for that. But you're going to push the post half through the back there, and then the stud sits on top of that. And then that all sits on top of the anvil. There's the two sides, so you got to get the right side there. And the other half of the setting tool, this is the other half that has a little concave end, and that situates right over the stud. And then I'll hit that a few times. And again, if it's loose at all, just give it a few extra taps and you should be all set. But there we go, snap. And now we're going to mark the placement for the handles. First of all, we're going to mark the center of the exterior if you haven't already. I'm just going to mark it with the pencil right within the seam allowance. And then what I just like to do is keep a gridded ruler right above where I'm marking. It makes it really easy to just go the indicated amount over on each side. And I just make a mark. And then I flip it over and do the same to the back. And that's marked for the handles. All right, so I am using the cotton webbing for my handles. I've got two pieces here. They're both cut to 28 inches long. And the main thing here is that you're going to want to make sure that your handle is not twisted. So it goes in one continuous loop without being twisted. So this, if I had it like this, it would be twisted. And it's kind of hard to see that on a camera, but just make sure that if your fingers run along the top edge, that they meet. If you are using leather, you're going to want to place, if it has a right and wrong side, you're going to want to place the right side, or like maybe the cleanest side of the leather, right side down on the exterior. So then I'm just going to use these pins, and I'm just going to pin my straps in place. I'm going to meet the edge of the strap with that marking that I made. And it's okay to not have it lined up exactly at the top edge there. I almost prefer that. It gives it a little bit of more of the strap inside the tote, so you can make sure that it's extra reinforced. So I'm pinning there. And I'll take my other handle. Okay, so now I'm going to take it over to the machine and I'm going to baste it in place right along where each of the handles are. Okay, so now the handles are both basted in place. Again, it's just right along the edge of each end of the handle. Okay, and here's just to show you how I do the leather handles. I'm going to be using just a little over a 3mm stitch length, just because it's leather. I don't want to put too many holes in it. And this is just basting it in place, just like you would for the webbing. But you're going to place the right side of the leather, right sides together with the exterior, and just start stitching. Okay, so those are basted in place. All right, so the exterior is now complete, and we're going to get ready to start on the lining next week. See you then.